Hi, my name is Taylor Banning. This is Fatu. We are two leaders with the Action Lab for Social Justice here at Columbia School of Social Work. And we are so excited to have this wonderful panel tonight. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panelists. Just to give a quick background on the Action Lab history, the lab started actually pretty recently, and it was organized by students, particularly Black students and women, calling out the anti-Black racism within the institution and our curriculum, and really calling on our school to do anti-racist work and really kind of revamp our curriculum as a whole. And so when Fatu and I joined the program this year, we noticed that the Action Lab hadn't yet started an initiative for immigration justice. So we got together with awesome advocates and activists in New York City and formed a partnership with Africana and really made this student group come together in partnership with city orgs. And we're really excited to continue this legacy of learning from Black women and following their leadership on making our city better, making social work better, making ourselves better. So I just want to welcome y'all tonight. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited. Clearly, we have an awesome turnout. And yeah, I'm really excited. So I'll pass it over to Melissa Johnson, the New York organizer for Black Alliance for Just Immigration. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Greetings and good evening, everyone. Okay, that's a little slow. I know everybody hustled and bustled to get here. It's after work, it's after class, the subway, the bus, the train. Well, we're New Yorkers, right? And for those of you who are not New Yorkers, welcome, and welcome to this conversation. But we are New Yorkers, and in the spirit of being New Yorkers, greetings, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. And that's not just for me. We have, several people on our Zoom and our webinar this evening who are joining us from all over the country for this important conversation. So when we speak tonight, we ask that you listen with your full selves, your full hearts, and you really engage in the conversation that's happening, because it's incredibly important. I've not been in these almost 3 years a part of a convening of great importance, and also with such esteemed panelists that we have this evening. My comrades, my fellow organizers, my fellow practitioners in this work of immigration justice, working on behalf of Black migrants, and particularly Black women. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'm thankful to Taylor and Fatu and the Immigration Justice Initiative via the Action Lab for Social Justice for inviting Baji to be a part of the planning process and to moderate tonight's panel. Again, I'd also like to thank and welcome all folks in the room, those on the Zoom, particularly those who are not a part of this panel, but a part of immigrant rights, racial justice, and gender justice work, whether here in New York City, the state, or across the country, because our work is incredibly important in holding the line, filling the gaps, pushing legislators and policymakers to do better on behalf of the people. So again, thank you and welcome. To ground myself in this conversation, again, my name is Melissa Johnson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the New York organizer for Baji, and I'm a proud Jamaican migrant. So yeah, let's hear it, right? Let's hear it. This is an African diaspora conversation, honoring and spotlighting diaspora women. And so I'm proud to be a part of the diaspora, and biasly, I'm proud to represent Jamaica. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As a Brooklyn resident, I'm proud to also represent Caribbean and particularly Jamaican communities in Flatlands and Canarsie, Brooklyn, where I have migrated to with my parents and found home community, where we migrated and were able to get work visas, and then eventually permanent residency, and many years later, citizenship, which I have now. So my experience and my story reflects so many Black migrant families who are in transition, who are in movement, and who are a part of a legacy and a lineage of building community here in the United States. And as an organizer, as a practitioner of immigration and racial justice and human rights, I know it is on the backs of Black women and Black migrant women that we have a proud and strong body of work and policies that reflect all diaspora people. So I'm grateful to be a part of that lineage. BAJI is the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. We are a national Black racial justice and migrant rights organization fighting for the liberation of all Black people. As New York organizer, my work is on educating folks on the criminal legal system and the immigration system and its impacts on Black migrants. Our work, and my work in particular, is to amplify individual campaigns, issue campaigns that center Black migrants, particularly Black women, and engage in racial justice and immigrant rights coalitions, because this work is not done in a silo. I know that the amazing panelists here tonight who are doing frontline work, who are doing direct services work, who are doing advocacy, and who are doing legal services work, know that this work is done in community. So I'm glad to be a part of that community. As an organization, we center our work in Blackness, where we live and work in understanding that the complications of the intersectionality of the Black migrant experience impact us on every aspect of our identities, of our journeys, and our lives. Some of us find ourselves in the US or coming to the US for economic reasons, for war, for conflict, for other violent systems of harm or security, for a fuller life. But for whatever reason we find ourselves here in the US, and no matter what we cannot fail to name the ways in which white supremacy, white supremacist, heteronormative, capitalist, and imperialist systems operate and employ the carceral state to impact our lives through violent anti-Black discriminatory and inhumane practices, which uniquely impact us as Black migrants and Black migrant women. In the spirit of tonight's convening and Women's History Month, I'd like to start with a short excerpt from BAJI's 2020 Our Stories and Visions, Gender and Black Immigrant Communities report. Please note that this report has been edited and amended to include additional language and points to try to reflect the fullness of our experience. From the experiences that Black women and femmes face in interpersonal relationships, to the discrimination we face in the workplace, at the hands of healthcare practitioners, as well as the impact of policing and the carceral state that shape our access to opportunities, systems of care, and have sought to influence our life outcomes, our needs are oftentimes minimalized, neglected, or completely ignored. Due to the discrimination faced based on our race, gender, immigration status, and other aspects of our identity, we are in search of spaces and relationships that simply allow us to be. We need restorative moments where we can allow our bodies to take a break from hypervigilance. Moments where safety just is. Moments where we are held tightly by our communities. We know, however, that our liberation cannot be fully actualized while we or our loved ones are incarcerated. We know that our liberation cannot be fully actualized while our families are separated at borders or violently detained or deported. We know that our liberation cannot be fully actualized while we are unable to fully explore our genders and sexualities. We know that our liberation cannot be fully actualized while we are unable to freely discuss our mental health, receive holistic and quality and affordable care. The systems of care that we practice and that we demand for each other is how we strengthen our communities and how we stay in unity. This is a practice of care, this work. This is a practice of love for Black folks and Black migrant folks. This is a practice of justice, which is love. In tonight's presentation, I will cover 3 topic areas that will attempt to speak to some of the policy challenges impacting Black migrants. This presentation, however, is in no way exhaustive, but attempts to address particular areas of work that Baji focuses on. These areas include practices of harm, protections for Black migrants, and human dignity-centered social infrastructure. Anti-Black criminalization, policing, and incarceration. Criminalization. We know the same racist policing that incarcerates non-immigrant Black people in America also affects Black migrants. Anti-Black racist tropes around crime and safety through policing have historically devastated Black migrant communities and Black communities, leading to mass incarceration through the 94 crime bill and then the 96 IRA bill, which led to allowing permanent residents to be deported and detained. Today, these effects are felt through bills that are directly correlated to recently passed Congress bills. So the Lincoln-Riley Act and the Improving Public Safety Through Immigration Warrant Issue Act are just to name a few of some of the bills recently passed by this year's Congress, which directly targets Black migrants, enables the sharing of information between local law enforcement and ICE, and further allows the detainment and deportation of migrants. These criminalizing bills pushed by President Biden and Congress threaten our well-being, criminalize and alienate us because we're Black folks and migrants, and further separate and destroy our communities. Policing. As you can see on this screen, NYPD's budget is $11 billion. Let's just sit with that. $11 billion. That is to remind you how much money is going into funding, policing, and violence, and incarceration, and separating and destroying our communities. That is not funding and community services, public resources, social services, and the resources and health and services that we need desperately. And that includes for vulnerable folks, disabled and LGBTQ folks, houseless folks, and most importantly, for Black folks. We saw Adams' current budget this year, reflect the attempt to defund the Department of Education, Social Services, Homeless Services, and Asylum Seeker Services support, all between 5 and 10%. Yet this $11 billion budget for NYPD has gone into at least 2,000 new cops on our streets and in our neighborhoods, and also the National Guard being deployed into our subways, which does not reflect care, which does not reflect the needs of community, and only offers new advancements in military-grade equipment and secret and private surveillance methods and products around the city. Incarceration. With respect to incarceration through Baji's policy and research teams, we know that the number of Black folks incarcerated, regardless of immigration status, is at an all-time high. Let's sit with that. The number of Black folks incarcerated, whether US citizen or migrant, is at an all-time high. We are using that money to lock up folks, to detain folks, not to free folks and liberate folks and give them the care that they need. The number of Black migrants in migrant detention has shifted from 76% to 86%. And the number of Black migrants deported from migrant detention on criminal grounds has risen from 45% to 58%. And finally, Black migrants are still 6 times more likely to be locked in solitary confinement while in detention. What all this means is that instead of focusing on community transportation, transformation, and systems of care, New York City, New York State, and the federal government have all prioritized anti-Black, xenophobic, and violent practices and policies for profit over the well-being and health of our potential, the people. I'm going to quickly try to go through this because I know we want to get to our panelists and have a lively discussions. So I just want to mention a few things about protections, which is important in this conversation around migrants, new arrivals, detention, deportation, and where this fits into the conversation around particular protections for Black migrants. So as Black migrants, we know the devastating harms of political, economic, and military violence around the world. That's why many of us have sought refuge here. However, it has been through dedicated struggle by Black migrant organizers and activists and communities, as well as frontline organizations, to demand the US government grant protections specifically for Black migrants to enable us entry, resettlement, and inclusion here in the US. So temporary protected status is an important immigration protection tool that provides temporary relief for 6, 12, or 18 months to protect migrants from being forced to return home to countries undergoing extreme conflict, violence, or instability. Now, this is important to note because of a list of several countries at the top: Cameroon, Somalia, Haiti, Ethiopia, Sudan, and South Sudan, as well as Honduras, have TPS. Currently, we're seeing what's happening in Haiti. We send love to Haiti and Haitian folks, whether here in the US or back home in Haiti. As TPS for Haiti is there's a campaign to extend it, and we know the importance of TPS. While folks are arriving here, whether being bussed in or flown in, over 180,000 people, I think, new Black migrant arrival or new arrivals have come into New York City, many of whom are Black migrants. We know that folks need protection from being returned home while they seek asylum through immigration protection, immigration court proceedings, while they try to resettle, find housing, find shelter, find education, work training, so they can actually begin a life here. So it's important to note this because as we seek opportunity and access in asylum, the legal mechanisms and the advocacy methods that we have to protect Black migrant folks are not enough, and we need more. However, it's important to note that while TPS is important, it's only temporary. We also need permanent protections, which is a pathway to citizenship, which is adjustment of status so folks can get their permanent residency, which means work authorization, which means asylum defense, which means case management, which means health and mental health screenings, which means care services, education, language translation and support, which means all the systems of care that we know that we should have and deserve. All folks, particularly all vulnerable folks, and especially Black migrants and Black migrant women and femmes, deserve these systems of care as well. And finally, I just want to point to this slide around human dignity-centered social infrastructure, because we can talk about this more in the panel, but as new migrant arrivals are arriving, our current systems of housing and shelter are not humane. We know that there is hundreds of vacant housing, apartments, rooms available that are not being used to house folks who have been here, long-term residents, and new arriving folks, because our system of housing and shelter has been failing us. So no wonder it is failing recently arrived folks. So we must advocate and hold and demand the line for housing and for shelter that has livable conditions, because what we've seen for shelters for new arrivals and new migrant arrivals is not humane, is not livable, and does not actually seek to support care. As we're in the School of Social Work, I know that many of you who are social work students and those of us who are frontline practitioners understand the importance of social services. And so I will just say humane social services, all of which you see on the screen, from IDs, health services, food, language, ESL classes, fares, work training, education, should be available and accessible and consistent for all vulnerable folks, including Black migrants, many of whom are often neglected in accessing these services. And again, a case for case management, we want public benefits and community navigation that supports all vulnerable folks, including Black migrants. This slide, the graphic that points to NYPD just shows the $11 billion marker of how much NYPD is being funded more than other services. And so this really goes to the heart of, instead of housing, health, and resources, which Black folks and Black migrants need in particular, NYPD is taking up such a large percentage of our budget. We need defunding and defunding of NYPD and investment in these social services. This is important, right? As New Yorkers, we had this conversation and we were very frank about it, right? In 2020 and 2021, we were on the streets saying defund. And it's important message and tool and vehicle to get at the heart of what's, causing us pain, suffering, causing us violence, tearing apart our communities and our families, and not actually uplifting or investing in the social services, the systems of care, and the public benefits that we deserve, all New Yorkers. Quickly, a call to action, because as an organizer, that's what we do, is call folks in and help folks understand that action is a verb and must be acted on. We want to support the folks who are on this panel doing the work and other practitioners and organizers in the room, because they continue to lead the way for justice, care, and dignity for all folks, but particularly the most vulnerable folks. So I ask you tonight, don't leave without getting materials or connecting with the panelists here of how you can support their organizations, as well as other comrades in the room who are a part of other organizations. In tonight's conversation, we talk largely about the funding that's going to NYPD, and I offer this reframing. The conversation around the asylum crisis, has largely been on people. I ask that you shift that narrative to focus on a misprioritization of policies, practices, and resources. Because long before migrant new arrivals entered the city, we were already struggling as a city to protect and support vulnerable New Yorkers, many of whom were already Black migrants. This couldn't be a conversation about justice if we did not name the importance of liberation and freedom of all Black folks. And so while we ask to free all folks, this is a conversation about immigration. We also hold that it's important to get New York out of the business of migrant detention. Yeah. We also hold that it is important to get New York out of the business of migrant detention. What that means is the Dignity Not Detention Coalition and Act that is here tonight, the coalition that supports and amplifies the act and is working to get it passed, is here tonight, and we'll be able to talk about their work to end migrant detention in New York State, stop new contracts, and free folks. Because that's really where freedom is, right? Where we can remove ourselves or be freed from detention and incarceration, come back to our communities, strengthen and create wholeness in ourselves, with our families and our children. And around TPS, the Haitian Bridge Alliance, who's not here tonight, but we amplify and support, is also launching a campaign to extend Haitian TPS for Haitian migrants. Please check out Haitian Bridge Alliance and their work to extend TPS, because this is important, particularly in this time with what's going on in Haiti. And we know and we hold that the US's involvement in Haiti has caused the current conditions. And so who are we to not be involved in supporting folks who desperately need it, who should have support, should have this right to access, when our government has betrayed us and been involved in operations and missions to destabilize a Black majority country, and one of the first to become its own independent country. It is a part of our history and our lineage to do this as Black folks and Black migrant folks. And we'll speak more about asylum seekers tonight, but I just say there are several ways to push City Council to do more on behalf of Black migrants. We know with the asylum seeker shelters, there's a current 30 and 60-day stay limit. I urge you to contact your City Council members, to email them, to call them, and let them know this bill is inhumane, is unjust, is anti-Black and racist, as it disproportionately impacts Black migrants. We need Afro-Indigenous language support, as there are so many Black new arrivals here who aren't receiving the language services support to be able to access the services. We need shelter conditions fixed for all folks. We need ESL and work training, and we need to fund case management, social services, and legal services, so folks can have support, whether they are seeking asylum, whether they are getting adjustment of status, or if they are on the path to getting citizenship. So thank you.
So I'm just going to ask quickly if you all can introduce yourselves and your organizations in your own words, because I think that's important.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for your time tonight. My name is Ajifan Tamarena. As mentioned, I'm the board secretary with the Gambian Youth Organization. Gambian Youth Organization, GYO, is located in the South Bronx in the 15th Congressional District, which is the poorest congressional district in the whole of the United States. It was found in 2002 by Gambian migrants who came here fleeing from dictatorship and political persecution to find safety and security and economic justice in the US. Following its founding, it really focused on empowering the community, uniting the migrant community in the South Bronx, making sure people had access to services and resources, and just building community for joy and coming together. And since then, we've moved to like working on housing justice, food justice, access to services and resources, particularly working with newly arrived asylum seekers and migrants in the community who have been there for long terms. So
Hi, everyone. So my name is Tiffany Jade Monroe. I am the Trans Justice Coordinator for Caribbean Equality Project. And yes, I am a trans woman. I hail all the way from Guyana, South America. I work as the coordinator for Caribbean Equality Project. So we are the only LGBTQ plus organization that advocates for the LGBTQ plus community from the Caribbean. We're located in Richmond Hill, Queens. So yes, I came all the way from Queens. So I came all the way from Queens, and I really wanted to be here and to bring my voice to the table. Also, the work that we do in the organization, we have support groups. We do a regular food pantry in Brooklyn at Parkside Plaza. You guys might have seen us sometimes. It's every third Saturday in the month. We also have amazing programs. And one thing we advocate for as well is our civic engagement work that we do. It's our vote, our voice. We must go out there, we must vote, we must make sure that most of the policies and legislations are for us and for community. And one thing with my work I do as a trans justice coordinator, I do a lot of legislative advocacy, especially going to Albany and speaking to our elected officials to ensure that there are bills that are not discriminative against the transgender community, especially the Black and Brown transgender community and the entire LGBTQ plus community on the whole. And I will say to you, I'm doing all of this work, and I'm also an undocumented asylum seeker here in the USA.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Abba. So to understand why I do the work, I want to share briefly my story. I came to the United States at the age of 2. I found out I was undocumented at the age of 16 when my apartment was raided by the FBI, NYPD, and CIA. I became the first female minor after 9/11 to be accused of being a potential suicide bomber. I was spent 6.5 weeks in juvenile detention center, released after with agreement of wearing an ankle bracelet, a curfew, and the list goes on. But I was granted asylum, and then from asylum to green card, and then from green card to citizenship. My journey to citizenship took 16 years. And I've been doing this work for 18 years. And one of the things that I noticed within the Black immigrant work is the direct service was missing. We have a lot of advocacy work, but we needed people to actually be on the ground to help fill out paperwork, to translate. So I opened up an organization called Africana 7 months ago. Thank you. It started because we were welcoming the buses that were coming from Texas. I was the only Black woman on the ground welcoming migrants coming. But I noticed there were only Hispanic migrants that were on those state buses. And I kept calling around and saying, where are the Black migrants? And then found out the anti-Blackness, which we'll touch on during a conversation of what Black migrants were going and how they're coming into New York City. We've been doing this for 7 months. Thanks to Taylor and Fatimata, we've serviced 3,000 people a month. So thank you.
That's so amazing. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sama Sise. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an attorney at the Center for Constitutional Rights. So my positioning here is a little different. Let me use a different mic. My positioning here is a little different. And I think a huge part of that is due to the way that Center for Constitutional Rights does our work. So I'm a lawyer, and we're a legal organization, but we're movement lawyers. And so what that means is understanding that the law is not the center of what we do. It's only one tool in furtherance of liberation for people who, for lack of a better word, have boots on their neck, right? And so we work with movements. We are organizers. We're people who are on the ground. We work with directly impacted people. We are directly impacted. And we use litigation when our community partners say that this is something that will further their movement. So for instance, some of the work that CCR does is we have a litigation right now against Orange County Jail, which is a jail in New York State that contracts with ICE for the purpose of detaining migrants. And we work with the Dignity Not Detention Coalition, and that was a litigation that we developed with the coalition to further their efforts to end immigration detention here in New York State. Another example of some of the work that we do that really collaborates with movement is we do a lot of work around Cameroonians who were deported in 2020 by the Trump administration in retaliation for advocacy that they were doing. And we've been doing a lot of work through different forms of litigation and advocacy to bring people back who were deported. And so there's many other things that I can talk about later on about the work that we do. But just a bit of centering for me and why I do this work. I'm sorry, this sounds so bad. It might sound so bad. I'm centering of me and why I do this work. I think similar to most people here, I am an immigrant. I came to the United States when I was 7 years old because of war. And I think that's like really important as we are in the core of US empire is to realize this country, right, that has so much stolen wealth, so much stolen land, right, is causing so much harm abroad as well. And that's what's leading to us coming here. It's not, the narrative is that, everyone wants to come here. And, as someone who lives in a family that has so much trauma about that migration, it's not a desire to be here, right? And so my family's from Sierra Leone and Liberia, experienced civil wars. US, British, all had involvement in that, right? That led to so much displacement of people, so much death, so much carnage. Thinking about Palestine right now and how US and British involvement with that is happening, right? And what we see happening all over the world. And so I think CCR also does a really good job of ensuring that imperialism and the understanding of how the international is also local is really central to a lot of the work that we do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janae Cawthon. I'm the Executive Director of Families for Freedom organization, which is based in Manhattan, New York. Families for Freedom has been in effect since 2002. It was started by two young immigrants by the name of Sabash Kartel and Arti Shahani. Both of their parents were faced with deportation, so they decided to, instead of suffering in silence, they started the organization in their home. Now, they passed the torch on, now I have it. We're located in an overpriced office in Midtown Manhattan. We know how those rents are. And what got me into this work, I initially said it was my former partner, Jean Montreville. I didn't acknowledge that I was born into this. My dad is a Jamaican man that was deported when I was very young. Fortunately, he was able to make it back, but he's living in darkness. Fast forward, I fell in love with a man by the name of Jean Montreville. He's from Haiti. We met in 2002. We had our first child in 2003. Gene made a mistake when he was 19 years old. He got arrested for a non-violent drug offense in the state of Virginia. For his first arrest, they gave him 33 years. He served 11 years out of that 33 years. During the time of him serving his sentence, immigration came to see him because Ira changed. And I was kind of shocked. At this time, I didn't know him while he was serving his time. I met him afterwards. I never knew immigrants were faced with so many injustices. Immigration laws run retroactive. His conviction was in 1989. The law didn't change to 1996. What they didn't know that he had a force behind him, because when I decided to commit myself to him and we created a child, I didn't sign up to be a single mom. I remember that day that he was on parole because they released him 5 years supervision. He received a letter from his parole officer telling him to report to parole. They're going to release him early. It happened to be an ICE raid. It was in the paper in Brooklyn, New York. So the deportation officer called me saying, oh, we're going to deport your partner. I'm like, deport him? What did he do? Because Gene left that out of his resume. He didn't tell me he had a final order of deportation. He only told me about, his conviction. So I got into action. At that time, I had my gateway computer. I don't want to age myself, but I'm 46 years old. And at that time, they didn't have high-speed internet. So I remember myself having to go to the 99-cent store to get one of those long extension cords. And if those of you who remember, you had to unplug your house phone to plug it up to get Wi-Fi. It was just crazy. So I started writing a letter, and the subject was, please help me keep my family together. Families of Freedom was one of the first organizations to reach out to me. And when you're going through this, you feel so alone, because I'm like, I'm going to have to go on the news. Everyone's going to be in my business. But I said, to look at my son, knowing that I was raised in a single parent household and my son doesn't have to go through the same things I went through. So I said, if the media it is, the media it is. Gene was eventually released from detention, but the fight was not over. He was deported in 2018 under Trump's administration. But what they didn't know, I have filed for a pardon for him in 2010 in the state of Virginia, because I did my research and I realized a pardon was his only path to get his immigration case reopened. Fortunately, by the grace of God, NYU attorneys, Alana Das, I can never stop repaying her. She took on his case. We put more pressure on Governor Ralph Northam of the state of Virginia. He gave him a pardon. And then by him getting a pardon, I thought, oh, he's going to be returned back to the United States. But no, it's still a fight. So they had to fight with immigration to get him back. They gave him 6 months to file for the 212C hearing again. And he came back in 6 months. And when we were in, that was my first time being in an immigration court. And to hear immigration asking him, did you get arrested or any parking tickets when you were in Haiti? And I said to myself, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? But to see a white judge cry and see that Gene was, when he was going through his immigration hearing, he didn't even have an attorney, because I'm not sure if you know this, but I'll let you know, immigrants don't have a right to attorney. Like if they go hop the train, they're gonna get a right to attorney in a criminal court in New York City, but if they're in immigration court, they have to find their way. And immigration attorneys, they pry on immigrants because they know that they're struggling to stay here. So they take their money, because they took money they took money from me when Gene first started this case, filing frivolous papers. I'm not an attorney. I thought all of these papers they had me notarizing was going to do some justice. It didn't. It wasn't until he got a pro bono attorney at NYU that we was able to shed light on his case. And when the judge said he's going to grant him his pathway to citizenship, we just became very ecstatic, because they don't know the trauma when you're dealing with immigration, it affects your whole family. When he was detained for the last time in 2018, prior to him to being deported, our son was a freshman at Brooklyn Tech. And I remember as a mom telling our son, because we have 3 children, but the reason why I'm speaking about our son, because the 2 girls need their mom and their dad, but boys, especially Black boys, without a father in the household is very hard. And I remember Josiah telling me, Mom, I didn't pick Stuyvesant because me and Dad said we going to Brooklyn Tech. So on the first day of school, he was so happy. And I tried to hide from him that his dad was picked up by ICE again. And when he found out, he started a GoFundMe. He raised over $40,000 for his father in less than 2 weeks. And I said that, this showing the impact of him fearing losing his dad forever did to him. And to see him from going to get A's in school to F's. And then my son would say, our son, I always say my son, but he would say, why should I do good grades? My dad is not going to be here to see me graduate. And that broke my heart. Our daughter was 10 years old at the time. And even though Gene and I unfortunately got a divorce, we still co-parent well. And we didn't want our children riding public transportation. So it was like if I couldn't pick the children up, he would pick them up. So now that I'm a single mother, I have to work. So we had to allow our 10-year-old to take public transportation together, by herself. And I remember her calling me, she's getting lost on the train. I'm stressed out because I'm at work and my child is calling me from like one of those free phones on the corner. And I said, this can't be. I said, don't worry, I'm not going to give up the fight. I'm going to show you how we're going to turn this horrible situation to victory. When Gene called me in 2021 and said, baby, I'm coming home, I said, what? He said, yeah, I got my pardon and they told me they're buying my plane ticket. When he got his pardon, to see the smiles on our children's face, and Josiah was struggling, and he made sure that his dad got to see him graduate from Brooklyn Tech High School. It took him 5 years, but he did it. And he said he did not want to walk down that aisle without his dad seeing him. So this is why I have a love for this work, because a lot of people who, some of these people that do the work, they don't have a story. And when people that's directly impacted, they feel like you don't know what we're going through. I know what it feels like because I was at the forefront. Thank you.
All right. The general consensus about one of the important questions to be asked is, what is missing in the space or the system and the work around immigration? So I'm going to actually ask Janae to start. We're going to go in the opposite direction just to mix it up. Yeah, just mix it up, just to mix it up, right? We want to hear from all voices and different angles and perspectives.
Is it on?
Hello?
Here, this is that.
Hello?
Yes.
I would say a realistic goal, meaning for example, I deal with a lot of people from Mexico. They deport them and then they write back. So obviously they're escaping something. So we have to create a pathway to citizenship. We have to understand that we're saying, oh, the migrants don't want to work. If people are unemployed, how can they afford a work permit? That's not free. They should have fee waivers for people that don't have income. They should not discriminate against Black and brown people. We want the same privileges as the people from Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have to deal with the issues like Jamaicans and Haitians and people from the DR, Venezuela, and those type of countries. They came here, they got their work visas, they have their you okay? They have their social security numbers and things of that nature. So we have to create a realistic plan because migrants are not going anywhere. We're here to stay.
I think there are a lot of things missing within our system, but trying to be proactive and think about us as a movement and what is needed. I think really for me, what I have focused on in my career and also in all of my organizing work is really this understanding that we can't afford for our movements to not be working together. Like we have to really, really ensure that we're speaking with each other, that we're engaging with each other, that this work is collaborative. And I think even the idea, Melissa talked a lot about the ways that the immigration system and the criminal system are all levied against Black people, regardless of your immigration status and things like that. And I think there hasn't been enough work done. And, there are people doing it like Baji and other organizations, but there needs to be more work done to really bring these movements together because there is a pitting against each other of movements, right? Like for instance, when we're doing work to end contracts at local jails, obviously there are folks that are doing criminal justice work within those jails as well, and we should be collaborating with them because what's going to happen if that contract ends is those beds are going to be used for other things, right? And if we're truly abolitionists, as I am and various coalitions I work in are, we should be working together and understanding that all our movements, all our struggles are interconnected, specifically if we're working towards immigration justice, because I think I believe it was Abe who said this. I remember this clearly when I was a law student. He came and spoke. Abe is someone who works for Baji as well, and he talked really, really clearly about how the only difference between and he was obviously just sort of like trying to make a point. There are lots of differences. The only differences between Black people who were born in the U.S. and migrants is this idea of citizenship, but even that is not really anything, right? Because in the US, even Black people who have citizenship are treated as second-class citizens, right? And really understanding the ways in which we are really connected and how these systems, the criminal system, the immigration system, are all working and functioning through anti-Blackness, and therefore we need to be together in this fight and ensure that there's no pitting of us against each other.
There's a lot, but to piggyback on what you guys are saying, I think that also the conversation of Black migrants is not in the conversation when we talk about immigration, and people with lived experience are not making these policies. I'm glad that DACA is there, but DACA doesn't make sense. You know, even with this migrant crisis, we've been saying, well, at least I've been saying for the last 18 years, asylum does not make sense. Now that we have a national crisis, they're like, oh my God, this doesn't make sense. You got to wait 180 days. Yeah, I've been telling you that. So I think the conversation of how people who've lived experience at the table making the policies, and definitely having the voices of Black immigrants, because we are drowned out in this conversation.
For me, I think what is missing, I think humanity and empathy. I think we've forgotten that what is the USA without migrants? And it's something I always tell people is like, what is US culture? Pastas came from the Italians. Where do burgers and fries came from? But it's like especially New York City is so diverse. There's so many different cultures. And I think we've forgotten to have that humanity and that empathy for our brothers and sisters, for our siblings. You know, with Black Americans and then Black migrants, there's always that clash that I see myself, and even within my community. You know what is so hard to understand? It's we go through so much struggles in the Caribbean with our own identities, and then when you come here, you go through another struggle where you're trying so hard to be accepted by your own Black community here in the USA, which is really, really hard. And I think for some reason they cannot relate to us because we have different accents, because we dress differently, and because our mindsets are different. And it's really hard to find ourselves amongst all of this. And I think, it's time for us to uplift each other and be there for each other. We need more allies. I don't know about all of you, but listen, we've been doing this work. This work is exhausting, but we still do the work because it has to be done. But where's our allies? When anything happens, we're standing up for American rights more than the American people. So that is the thing. Like, you have undocumented folks here fighting for your rights, fighting for rights for everyone. And why can't you treat us the same? One thing I will say, migration is in our blood because we have migrated for years. Baby, Christopher Columbus came here. He migrated from somewhere else and stole this. The native people migrated from different lands and went all across the world. Africans, we were forced to migrate because we were taken as slaves from our homelands. And that's how we were scattered across the entire world. But migration is in our blood, and we travel to different places and be in different spaces because that is who we are, migrants.
Thank you. I want to uplift that a little bit more. I think really rehumanizing, reshaping, owning our stories again and telling it in the way that it uplifts and empowers the migrant community, because we've seen what the media does. We've seen how it vilifies, and you've spoken about criminalization and what it's done to our communities. We've seen the recently newly arrived migrants, the stories that are being told in New York City, how it's pushing us against each other, of migrants versus immigrant communities that have already settled here for a long term. So just reshaping that narrative, and also knowing that immigration doesn't start at the destination, right? We had stories before we came here, right? We were other individuals with backgrounds, cultures, histories, values, principles, traditions. And so just telling those stories again. And I want to say, Jenny, thank you so much for sharing your story, how it impacted your children, because I think of that and I think of my mom's own immigration story, freeing from political persecution in the Gambia as a, single woman whose husband was like a victim of enforced disappearance, and she had 4 daughters and had to think of how to go from this whole different life to migrating to the South Bronx, raising her daughters and having to teach you like everything all over again in a new country. So just owning those stories, telling it again, and just amplifying who we are and what we bring.
I know we're running out of time, but if I may, this is Women's History Month. This is honoring and spotlighting diaspora women leaders. So I just want to follow up and ask this question specifically in regards to how do you see issues impacting or the system or the gaps in the system impacting specifically Black migrant women? Because I think that's important, right? So we're talking about narratives that are erased, that are neglected, that are completely marginalized in the system. And what we see often at Baji is, in particular, Black migrant women's narratives erased, distorted, buried from what's happening across the system, but what's happening directly to ourselves and in our communities. So just quickly, if we could have a little bit of your thoughts on, gaps in the system or challenges for Black migrant women.
What I see working with the Gambian Youth Organization, but also with my role at Muslim Community Network, really the mental health part of it. Black migrant women are having to go through the traumas of it all before migration. You're living in societies that are oppressive, patriarchal in nature, and then facing all these gender disparities. And then during migration and displacement, all of that plays a toll in you. And then what we're seeing, the stories that we're hearing when we sit at the center doing these intakes, really traumatic sexual assault, right? Lack of access to food and services, infrastructures destroyed, especially for those coming in from states that are in conflict. And then becoming the main breadwinner as a woman. So that's some of the issues that we're seeing. And once women come into the city, and I'll let Adam talk a little bit more about like access to housing for Black migrant women in the city. But then once you go through all these, that you're taking in all this violence, all this trauma, then how do you even begin to think about resettling and filing asylum and all these paperwork? Like you have to think about healing first before even getting to that. So it's like the intersection of all these struggles that we're seeing Black migrant women deal with.
For this International Women's History Month, I will say to you, this wasn't a day I was looking forward for, because, and it's nothing against, cisgendered women. It's nothing against that. It's just that I think we need to reach a place in society where we redefined what a woman is. And I've been trying to push that narrative so we could make some sort of change to redefine that. I recently just got an award from Khalil Anderson, who is our district leader in the district I'm in, which is in South Ozone Park, Richmond Hill, Queens. And he actually gave me the Women of Accomplishment Award. And that's the first for a transgender woman on International Women's History Month, a first for that district. And, these are stuff that we're changing that narrative. And I think we need to reach a stage where we redefined what women look like, or redefined what is women. Like, what's the definition of that? Being a trans woman, I've been through so much in my life. When I came here as a gay man fleeing years of emotional and physical violence and homelessness after my parents abandoned me. And look at me now, standing in front of you as Tiffany Jade Monroe, a whole trans woman. And I will say to you that, all those struggles, those are what made me who I am today. But, the system here and how it goes when it comes to even us acquiring work documentation, work authorization, we have to re-traumatize ourselves. We have to. When we sit in front of these 5 lawyers, 6 lawyers, how many you get? Sometimes you're not even getting any. You have to do that case yourself. But when we sit in front of all of these lawyers, we re-traumatize ourselves. We re-traumatize ourselves because we have to remember and account for every single thing so that we can make that case as strong as possible. And can you imagine what an LGBTQ person has to go through for that? They have to show proof that they're gay show proof that they're a lesbian. They want to see photos. They want to see social media accounts. Some of them are asking to see dating apps. Are you on there? So this is the type of stuff we talk about when it comes to the system and what we have to go through. And being a woman of trans experience, I uplift everyone around me. One thing I will say, Black and brown trans women have been fighting for many things that don't even concern us. When Roe versus Wade was overturned, we were out there rallying for that. Sadly, I cannot make a child, but we were still out there rallying for that because we saw the need for our community and we saw that we had a voice and we could amplify this issue. And sometimes we are looking forward for other cisgendered women in the community to amplify us and be there for us. We do not want, you know what? I love that. After that. We do not want to be pushed in the shadows. And I don't know if many of you know, but there's so many trans women that are killed every single year. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that I have to run to a specific community because I'm scared of my own Black community? I'm hanging out with Caucasian people because I'm like, you know what? They can protect me. They can be there for me. But sometimes even Caucasian people are not even using their privilege to help us. And I always tell people that I'm like, if you're in a position that you can use your privilege, you help us. You know what? Let me stop because I feel like I'm in church right now. But you see, I will say to you that, being a Black and brown migrant is so hard. Being an undocumented person is so hard. Being a person of LGBTQ plus experience is even harder because our own communities do not accept us here. We have to find other ways and other communities to be there for us. I know someone talked about, us having to wait for work authorization to find a job and to get work. And, I will say to you, some people might have a different view about this, but there's a lot of people out there that are doing sex work, and it's called survival sex work. And it's something that we've been working on is we're trying to say sex work is work. Because if you don't want us to do it, then give us the work authorizations. Give us the documentations. We will leave the streets. But for now, if you're not finding a solution, then I'm going to be out there 24/7 getting my money because I need a place to live. I need food to eat. And I have kids to feed. And we have to do this. Thank you.
I have to go after you. So for me, I see the women as they're coming into the city because we're at all ports of entry. It's very traumatic because I see them once they're released from detention center in Texas, they are either in a bus, a flight, or however they get to New York City. They have not gotten medical treatment from their sexual abuse during their journey here. So the first stop of welcoming them is to go to the ER with them. I am tired of going to the ER and talking to them and hearing the same old line that the doctors say. So there's no mental health services, there's no follow-up services, especially for Black women. And one of the things that's lacking is the language access, because they're like, oh, we have the language line, but my language isn't on there. And that you can't humanize me that way. So that's one challenge that the women have. And then I think the story, everyone just sees Black males on the TV. We have a lot of Black women that are here. I don't want to put her on the spot, but we have a Black migrant woman here, and she's phenomenal. And she's going to be a doctor soon. But if she says yes, I'll give her a shout out. But the challenges that she faced, they're getting kicked out of the shelter and they're constantly in the streets. Hi, Hulai, she said yes. Hulai is a great example.
I'll be your first patient.
She was kicked out in the streets and left in the streets because there's no other options for them. And a lot of these women are treated as sex workers, and then they're trafficked, they're staying with their abusers because they have no other options. And these men are taking advantage of them. And so we're seeing hundreds of women coming, but there's no service for them. I think clothing is another example. We offer culturally sensitive clothing for them because everywhere they go is a small bra, a small underwears, but my women are curvier. My women are heavier on top. So can I get an XL? Can I get an H? And they're like, what's an H? And you're educating people about our women, their hair, their body, little things. Like I didn't understand how important nail clippers were until I was doing this work. These are women who were on a journey for 3 months and finally made it to New York, and they're like, do you have a nail clipper? And I'm like, nail clipper? You know, you take advantage of certain things, but the voice of these women are invisible. And this 30-day policy of shelter is going to impact them the most. Even hygiene products. Everyone is offering them tampons, and they're like, no, but I want a pad. And they're like, but that's all we have is tampons. No, allow them to take what they want and what they need. So the voices of women are really drowning out in this conversation.
Yeah, I'll just add to something Adama talked about earlier, which is the fact that a lot of policies or programs are being created without people who are directly impacted being a part of it. And so the way that a lot of migrant women in New York State, but also just all around the country, get access to services is through a lot of organizations that get funding through the Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, right, that provide funding. And so a lot of these organizations are organizations that are doing like domestic violence focused work, and they will specifically work with women and provide them legal services, social services, things like that. And I used to do direct legal services at an organization called African Services Committee. And I had a program there for women, including cis women and trans women who had to face different forms of gender violence. And, you know, my clients, we had like a advocacy group. So I would provide the legal services, but we would also have an advocacy group where there was a social worker who would be there to help them talk through the different forms of patriarchal violence that they went through. And it was an interesting space because you had trans and cis women who were newly arrived. And so I think a lot of people thought there would be a lot of tension in this space, and there were at times, but I think most importantly, like this idea of violence, intercommunity violence, and being able to talk about that and what it means to create safety for each other outside of these state systems that are not thinking about us was really important. And safety planning together and them creating a group where they could rely on each other was really important, because a lot of these organizations that are getting VAWA money, that are DV organizations, they work with the NYPD, they work with prosecutors, they don't service people who have had any contact with the criminal legal system. And so you're effectively leaving out a lot of people out of this, specifically a lot of my trans clients that I would work with. You know, they were arrested for stupid things just because they were trans, and on the street they were assumed to be doing sex work. They were harassed by cops and things like that, so they couldn't get services at a lot of these places. And then even like for a lot of my clients that I worked with who experienced gender-based violence, when they would call the cops, they either wouldn't call the cops because they were afraid to call the cops, or when they would call the cops, a lot of them were arrested because, you know, whoever was their partner was assuming, we're saying like they were the ones who were the aggressor. And it's proven that Black women oftentimes are arrested by the cops, and they do believe that Black woman is the aggressor in the situation when they call the cops in gender-based violence situations, right? And so they had, even though a lot of their cases eventually were dropped, they had contact with the criminal legal system, and so they couldn't get services at a lot of these places. And so that was the work that I was doing before I came to CCR. And just another example is, you know, New York passed a really big law called the Domestic Violence Survivor Justice Act. You know, that was really championed as something that would get a lot of women out of cages, right? So essentially, if you are someone who's incarcerated, who had a history of domestic violence, and that domestic violence had anything to do with the reason why you were incarcerated, you get resentenced. And a lot of people started coming out because of that. A lot of people came home. And I organized with an organization called Survived and Punished New York, and we do a lot of work trying to end the prison industrial complex, specifically as it impacts women who've gone through domestic and sexual violence. But you know what this bill did and didn't think about? It didn't think about immigrant women at all. So one of my really close friends, who I knew for years and used to visit, we were so happy she came out through the DVSJA. And as soon as she came out, ICE picked her up. And there was no protection in the law for that. So you had a judge during her resentencing saying, hey, you know, like, you definitely shouldn't have been given this sentence. You should reunite with your children. Here's your freedom. And as soon as she was released from Bedford, ICE picked her up, and was deported, and she's in Panama right now, right? And we're fighting to bring her back so she can be with her US citizen children who are here. So again, a law that was championed as something that's for women, and, you know, it's something that's gonna free all these women. And they didn't even think about immigrant women when they were putting it together, and what the impact would be for women who had contact with the criminal legal system and were released, and then were immediately deported as soon as they were released.
Ooh, that was deep. So I would say healthcare. Healthcare is very important. We see a lot of Black and brown people dying during childbirth. Why is this? They live in the inner city and they're on Medicaid. When you're pregnant, if you're a migrant, you're entitled to that pregnancy Medicaid. And they don't get the healthcare services like someone that say lives on Park Avenue and able to go to NYU. I don't want to call out any hospitals, but I am. I'm from Brooklyn, but I live in Manhattan, like Brookdale Hospital, for example. That hospital should be shut down. There's so many migrant Black and brown women that went in there to have their babies and they didn't make it out. They don't talk about that. And then you have these migrant moms that's in family shelters. And we all know New York City doesn't have a latchkey law, but for migrants, it is. So if you're in a shelter, say, for example, we had a client, she had a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 10-year-old, she braided hair in Harlem. Her case manager caught ACS on her because you can't leave someone under the age of 18 in a shelter without a parent. She was stressed out because once ACS gets involved, they want to start critiquing everything. So I told her what I had to do when my partner was in Haiti. I had Barnes and Nobles become my babysitter. I had the library become my babysitter. I would send my kids to the movies while I had to do things just so they can be in a safe space. And, you know, she thanked me afterwards, but it's a lot. And we don't know the different types of traumas that these women have faced. I have worked with a woman where her stepfather impregnated her and her mother stayed with the stepfather. She now became gay. Her mother doesn't want to have anything to do with her. And she doesn't have status here. So she's not even able to address her mental health. They need to provide health care. They need to make people feel that we all have some sort of mental health on some type of level, whether it's PTSD, anxiety, and things of that nature. But migrant women feel if I go ask for help, they may take my children. They may say I'm crazy. So I constantly have to reassure them it's okay to ask for help. Everyone has a burnout point, and I'd rather you get the help than you snap. But as women, we're always forced to be strong, be strong, be strong. But sometimes we can't. Sometimes we want to cry. And I share my personal story where I remember all three of the kids had doctor's appointments at different doctors at the same time. I'm like, I'm only one person, but I use my community. And it was hard for me to do that. But people would say, oh, Janae, if you need my help, ask me. But as a Black woman, you know, I'm conditioned not to ask for things or figure things out. But at that time, I said, you know what? I done got diagnosed with high blood pressure. I didn't have high blood pressure prior to that, but it's just the stresses of trying to, my kids never saw me cry because I didn't want my children to see me cry. I will wait till they're away and I'll go in my room. But it was painful to see the pain that they were going through because their dad is no longer there. And Gene plays such an impactful role in his children's life. I could have dated a millionaire and they don't care. They want their daddy. I remember the day that I surprised them for Father's Day and I took the kids to Haiti. And I didn't tell Gene that we were coming to Haiti. I told him that someone was traveling to bring him a care package. So he's calling my phone and he's like, where's your friend at? Where's your friend at? And the kids hid behind the car and said, Daddy. And they all started bawling. And I mean, I was smiling inside because the kids were reunited with their father. I didn't feel safe in Haiti because Haiti is rough. We were staying in a 5-star hotel and all the lights went out and we started hearing gunshots. We had to change our flight and get back to the US quickly because Haiti was like under siege. They was throwing tear gas. The things that's going on now was even worse back then. So by us leaving, now I'm dealing with the kids saying, Mommy, is my daddy gonna be okay? I have to explain to him, Daddy can't come back with us right now. And other mothers have to tell their children that they can go to these check-ins at 26 Federal Plaza and it's not guaranteed they're gonna come out. So at Families for Freedom, we created a safe sheet. And on the safe sheet, they can give us their emergency contact number, their PIN number to their EBT card. A good friend, they can tell us what the plan they want to happen with their children in case something happened. If they're on any type of medication, I ask them to give their healthcare summary from the doctor because it needs detention centers. They don't like to give people their medication. And they know me, y'all can Google me. I will get the media involved. I don't care because immigrant rights is human rights. And I constantly stress that. Stop saying that people taking privileges away. We all have a right to a good and decent life. We all should be deserving of health care. We shouldn't have to prove ourselves that we deserve to be able to go to the doctor just like someone else. And they should start educating young people in the school. I went to a school today in Brooklyn to speak at a high school, and I remember being there last month. They had a play. A lot of the children are of Muslim faith, and they were being teased because of the lack of education. Muslims don't eat pork. Their parents sometimes send lunch because they want them to eat kosher foods. And one girl said that the girls was teasing her, like, why you coming with the lunchbox? You too big to have a lunchbox. But it starts with education. They should have once they quote unquote said we had a migrant crisis, which is really not a crisis. Being a former employee of New York City Department of Homeless Services, I hate to bust anyone's bubble, but the migrant population in the shelter is maybe 10%, if that. Most of the people in the shelter are born American citizens who their parents had them in the shelter. Now they got their kids living in the shelter, but now they want to make it seem like migrants is taking things away. That's not. Migrants would do the job that a lot of people born here wouldn't do. When we see these white children, who's minding their children? It's migrants. These nannies are migrants. Who's cleaning their house? Migrants. When we go to these restaurants, who's serving us? 9 times out of 10 is a migrant. So we have to let them know you're going to respect us regardless, not just because we're performing a service for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janae. Thank you, everyone on the panel, for specifically speaking to the ways in which the criminal legal system and the migrant enforcement system, or the immigration enforcement system, specifically impacts Black women, because these stories, these experiences, these examples are not heard enough, are not centered enough. But what they do demonstrate is that the systems, the carceral state and the immigration enforcement system, continue to be anti-Black, racist, xenophobic, and also misogynoir, specifically and violently attacking, threatening, and harming Black women. And I think that's an important piece of tonight's panel and discussion that we need to hold, is that when we talk about these systems, we must maintain a lens and an understanding that is intersectional, that also focuses on the most vulnerable folks, including Black migrant women. So thank you for that. I think that was an important part of tonight's conversation. What we also know is that this work, this experience, there's so much trauma involved. And so in the School of Social Work, and a part of tonight's conversation is that we ask for trauma-informed care that specifically centers and amplifies and uplifts Black migrant women for our unique experiences. And so for the social work students, for the case managers, for folks online, we want to see more of that in terms of the work that's happening, in terms of the direct services, and it to be connected with the work that's already happening from all of these incredible panelists. So we want to leave with joy, because despite the trauma, despite the pain, is that we also live simultaneously with joy. And so we want to hear from panelists of how they live with joy and how joy shows up in their work.
Thank you, Melissa. I think when I think of joy, it's just a call back to our roots. We come from communities and backgrounds that are rooted in joy, that are rooted in celebrating who we are. And so as an African woman, it's about gathering in community. It's about the family reunion. And that's not just your, mom, sisters and stuff. It's about all of us together having iftar, lunch, dinner together tonight. So it's about building that community, and how we're doing that in the work we're doing at GYO is really looking at the communities that we're serving and thinking of ways that we build community, whether it's wellness events that we're doing, back to school, like celebrations for the kids, eat, toy drives. Because what we found was like, during Christmas, there was a lot of toy giveaways in our community, but the Muslim kids were not having anything when it came to eat, especially in the South Bronx. right? So we were like, we'll start a Eat toy drive. Every Eid, we're going to make sure that the African immigrant kids got something to be joyful for. It's making sure that we organize the iftar for the migrants, asylum seekers, not just having them stand in line to collect bags of food, but having sit down lunches and dinners with them where we're like in one community and we're eating African food and halal food and reminding us of all those joys that we had back home. So that's like how I celebrate.
For me and my and our community, celebrating joy basically is being our true authentic selves, showing up and showing out, being you, being who you are. And I will say to people, many people might say, oh, this is what a trans woman should be. You should, when I look at you, I must see a woman. Your voice must be a certain way. Your hair must be a certain way. No, that's not so. I will say to people that your transition is unique to who you are. You don't have to be that feminine embodiment, but how you carry yourself and you being your authentic self with your personality, that is good enough to be accepted in this community. I want to tell people that, being a woman of trans experience, it's really tough for us. And it's hard for us to find that joy sometimes because there's so many things that we want to do for ourselves without being discriminated or ill-treated in community. When you talked about that law, I will say to you, I was actually a person that was really important and pivotal in testifying against a law. So I don't know how many of you know there was a law in New York City called the Walking While Trans ban. And what that clearly did is if you were a trans woman and you were standing on a street corner for more than 5 to 10 minutes, the cops have all right to arrest you, assuming you're a prostitute, which is ridiculous. So I testified against that. We got that out, which was really great. And that was a big win for community. But just to see all the negative rhetoric in every other state concerning, being a transgender person and all of this hate. And I will say to you, what brings me joy every single day is going out there and fighting against these terrible legislations, also making amazing wins for community and proving the history books wrong that they're trying to teach us because we have always existed. You don't let them tell you anything else. We have always existed. They've erased us from the books. The Egyptians was having fun, trust me, and especially the Greeks. We know what was happening with Caesar. We know what was going on in those times. So I'm saying to you that don't let them think that being a trans person is something that just randomly appeared. We have always existed, and our existence will continue to be resistance, and joy is inside of each and every one of us. Thank you.
You have to stop going after you.
I know, right?
For me, this is joy. This work can feel lonely. And I told you, when I was welcoming the buses, I was the only Black woman on the ground. And my voice was drowned out. If it wasn't the other white women on the spaces saying, well, Adama speaking, can you please keep quiet? Ilse, you guys with me, Ilse from Team TLC, she made sure my voice was heard. And she made sure I had a space in this. But this work can feel lonely. And Aji Fanta knows I was calling her at 1 o'clock crying because they were driving me crazy. So this is joy. But the biggest joy is also we're passing the torch. This phenomenal woman gives me joy. She's going to be the next generation of a lawyer. So we're going to invest in her. So that's where my joy. So I ask you all, reach out to her and see how you guys can support her and make sure that she becomes a doctor that she wants to be.
Yeah, I think similarly, I find joy in basically any opportunity to basically just push against the system. And maybe that just means I'm a workaholic, but I yeah, I find this work, I agree, there's a lot of trauma, and it can be heavy at times, but I think because it's collective work, because you're not, it shouldn't be something that you're doing alone or in a silo. I think that for me is what's joyous about it. And I think therefore the wins are even sweeter because we know how hard we fought for them. Like when someone's able to come home, when someone's able to come out of a cage, for me, there's nothing in the world that compares to that. And knowing that, while the state is trying to disappear our people and tell them that they're not loved, that no one cares about them, that we're pushing against that and saying that we will not let you disappear our people and that we will always fight for them. I think there's something really powerful in that, and that's hugely why I do this work. And then I also find joy in young people. I love kids. And I think they really just like highlight, like why we do this. And, I have a 2-year-old who is bossy and joyous, and just having to be at those play dates where I'm not using my brain around any of us and just listening to the ridiculously of them, like doing like watching Trolls and reenacting like little scenes from Trolls and things like that. I'm like, okay, like you find the little joys in the moment and you realize that life goes on, like despite all the difficulties, despite everything that's hard, and at moments can feel like you're suffocating, like life goes on. And I think there's joy in that.
Yes.
That's cute. What brings me joy is giving back. Some people, once they get a victory, they just say the hell with the movement. And that wasn't me. I like to see smiles on other families' faces. I like to reconnect children with their mom or their dad. I like to give people hope. During this whole alleged migrant crisis, I had the volunteers because we merged with a couple of high schools in Manhattan, and the children need community service. So I taught the young people, the stores that you shop at, like Target and Gap, write to them. Our office is a clothing store now. So if you know anyone that need clothes or shoes, you can send them to Families for Freedom, located at 35 West 31st Street, room 702. We was able to give out school supplies and things of that nature, and to see the smiles on these parent faces, knowing that they can get their child a coat, they can get their child a pair of boots. That brought joy to my heart. We got tickets from the Nets game. We took them to the Nets game. We just got tickets to see Harry Potter. I went to see Harry Potter. And just to see that they get to have some.
Nicki Minaj ticket?
Oh, not yet. We working on that. Things that they're normally not used to get out of the shelter environment. That brings me joy. And just to keep hope alive and tell them, I look at the broken immigration system as a bully. And I use my citizenship to stand up against that bully, because they can't deport me, and my voice is going to continue to be heard.
I just want to say that I want to add my voice to joy too, because there's a line in the Baji Gender Justice Report from 2020 where it says that, and I truly believe this, and I think for me in this work, it's what brings me joy is that Baji believes that our liberation as Black folks, regardless of our citizenship or immigration status, is possible. Our liberations from the systems of violence, of torture, of dehumanization, of incarceration and migrant detention is possible. And leading that movement and leading that work are Black women and femmes. And that gives me tremendous joy each day to get up, to persevere, to advocate for Black migrants, and particularly Black migrant women.
Since we are at the Columbia School of Social Work, the questions, what can we do to help? And what unique considerations should like social workers keep in mind when trying to address or help the Black immigrants?
Just to summarize, that's a big question. I think we answered kind of part of it, but what can social workers do? What can people who are not social workers online do or in the room do? How do we center and uplift folks who are doing the work? So do we want to answer? Do all of you want to answer? How can we center and uplift the work? Tiffany already provided information on an event that's coming up. Other folks on the panel want to talk about events, opportunities to connect. That might be an entryway into how to support organizations who are doing this frontline work. Do we want to start with Janae?
I would say volunteer, get involved with organizations, even if it's an hour, just volunteer. And understand this, Even though something is the law, that doesn't make it right. Slavery was once legal. Keep that in mind and educate your friends and tell them to volunteer also.
I agree with that. And then for the Dignity Not Detention Coalition, which is the coalition here in New York State that's working to get the state out of the business of making money off of detaining immigrants. We are a loose coalition. You don't have to be a part of a organization to join. And we're having a lobby day on April 16th where we're going to Albany. You can, you have all the information. So join us, come to Albany with us, talk to legislators about why immigration detention should not be something that's happening in New York State. New Jersey has gotten rid of immigration detention. Maryland has gotten rid of immigration detention. It's a movement that's happening all over the country, and New York State should not be in the business of detaining immigrants.
So quickly, we have a social worker in our school. She's a phenomenal from Columbia. So Ava. So I think if you have a specific education field that you're following, come to our office. We got a role for you. Volunteer, use those education skills at our office or at any of these ladies' office.
I would say find the courage and take some time to yourself to say, I don't know everything. Find that courage to tell yourself, hey, I'm not even going to try because I do not know. That is your strength. That is you saying that you don't know, but you're interested in learning more. And that is something that's really important that you should do. Do not try to fix everything. Do not try to be a part of everything if you do not know that action, that cause, or what it stands for, or what it means to be that person that's impacted. Try to learn, try to understand, and try to listen more, and try to come to some of these really amazing sessions. This definitely helps you to learn a lot. And also Free Palestine.
Just want to add, as we're discussing all this, that there are currently legislation in the New York State Assembly and in the Senate directly addressing some of the issues we spoke about. So access to language access, there's a bill, there's a right to language access. There's a bill in the Senate and in the Assembly. If you go to nyic.org, that's the New York Immigration Coalition's website. If you go on their campaigns, they have all the information on it and how you can, reach out to your representatives. If they haven't already co-sponsored this bill, ask them to do so. We've also had this going around. Please take it. It takes 2 minutes to send these emails. This is the Care for Immigrant Families package. It's access to legal representation. You've all heard here the struggle to getting access to legal representation. So that's currently in debate in the Senate and the Assembly in New York State, and the governor on April 1st is going to give out her budget. We're asking for $150 million to provide adequate access to representation for all immigrants. So please take a second, reach out to your representatives, ask them to co-sponsor, and also share it on social media, share with your colleagues and so on.
For me at Baji, it's very simple. We need to stop deportations and migrant detention, and we need to push these city and state and federal legislators to ensure that money is not going into policing and incarceration, but into communities, and particularly Black communities. Very, very simple for me. So thank you so much to everyone. We really appreciate you all for attending, for participating, for listening with your whole heart selves, and for supporting us. This is an incredible convening. I hope the first of many more, and that we invite more Black migrant women and femmes to this conversation. Thank you to everyone online who stayed with us and participated in this conversation. We really appreciate your support and engagement. Thank you so much, and good night.